Hello, guys. Welcome back to the My Sugar-Free Journey podcast. We are joined today by Dr. Elin Ostman. So, Dr. Ostman is a former associate professor and senior lecturer in applied nutrition at the Food for Health Science Center of Lund University in southern Sweden. Her 20-year career comprises groundbreaking research on the preventative potential of foods and healthy diets against lifestyle-related conditions such as type 2 diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. To date, she has authored 45 peer-reviewed original articles and 3 reviews. She is a frequent speaker at international conferences and events in the field, and most importantly, she's got a new product that she is here to talk about today, Good Idea Drinks, which I am all for any product that's out there that will help people consume less sugar, improve their health, because again, I really think sugar and really processed grains are the root of all of the problems that we are facing here in America and maybe in Sweden. I don't know what the obesity rates are in Sweden. We'll get to that here in a minute. But all the problems that we're facing, this epidemic of type 2 diabetes, epidemic of people getting their toes sawed off and losing feet, and the crazy things that are happening here that are widespread in America. The fact that we can't find a skinny person to save our life when we go to Walmart. We can't even find one of those little electric scooters to ride because everyone's already using them. It's pretty crazy, the things that we're seeing, and it all comes down, I think, to sugar and processed grains. So, Dr. Elin Ostman, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So let's get into your background a little bit before we start talking about your product. So I mentioned all of your accolades, I think, or some of your accolades at the beginning. What made you want to get into looking at diet?
Yeah, it was not a clear decision from the very early on, but I have always been interested in the medical field, in the health and medicine maybe. So I actually, before choosing my whatever studies I was going to go for university, I was pretty much into going to the medical field. But then for different reasons, I ended up more into the nutrition and health field and food science, which I'm very happy about now coming out of that, because it fits very much my ideas of rather trying to prevent things from happening than treating it while it's, I would rather be on that side to prevent things. So
Absolutely.
That's how I came into it, I think. And I've been lucky enough to find jobs and be able to do research in that field for many years.
Perfect. Yeah, that was one of the things that I've got a lot of respect for Dr. Lustig, because he was in the medical field, saw the problems that sugar was causing, wrote several best-selling books about the problem that sugar was causing, and decided to lead the field of medicine, go back to school to become a lawyer so that he could affect real change on the legislative level, trying to get past legislation that'll make it more difficult to have all these obese children that we have. So it's interesting that you kind of went the other direction. But either way, I mean, we need people on both sides of the equation. We need people, doctors shouting from the rooftops that there's a very definite problem, and it is an epidemic. I mean, what are you seeing in Sweden? I cannot imagine that the issues are as bad in Sweden as they are in America. I don't know, how long has it been since you've been to America, or have you ever been here?
I live here now. So
you live in America now?
I've been,
okay.
for a couple of years. I'm on my 3rd year here now. So to be honest, I don't have the exact figures for Sweden in mind, but I know that the problem is pretty big there as well. It's a small country, of course, but I would say that the division again between those that have good control of their health and those that not. Right. I mean, it's increasing even there. So, and we also, and for decades, we have been looking at America, we look up to USA for new trends and everything. So whatever happens here usually comes to us a little later. And when it comes to, foods and products, things like that. So although I think we have a basic diet that is maybe more grounded in good nutrients, and the Nordic diet with berries and fish and whole grains and things like that. Potatoes, we eat a lot of potato meals.
So we probably eat a lot more fish than the average American.
Yeah, I think we could eat more, but I think we do maybe a little bit more at least. I think it's very similar anyway. The problems are, and if you look at the EU level, I would say that there is a big a big problem also there with the hidden disease, not the least, the metabolic syndrome, and how many are actually having that without knowing it. So there is a lot to be done.
This is a little off subject than what we're going to eventually talk about, but I know Sweden has socialized medicine. Do you think that is you're able to kind of forestall some of the effects of a bad diet because people are able to get into the doctor and get care for different problems that arise faster than, say, here in America?
That's a very interesting question. I think that I've learned more, of course, since I live here about how people approach the medical system, and of course I understand that there is a big difference between those having a good health insurance and not.
Right.
I think in some sense we are meeting the doctor and maybe also everybody has access to care,
right,
in Sweden, more or less. So that's a good starting point. I think though, and there is a problem with the medical professional as such not being taught nutrition. So it's still a little bit hard. A doctor can see if you're overweight or obese and maybe tell you some simple advice around that. But I think it should be addressed more qualified in terms of what you can do with your diet and your lifestyle rather than what is done today. So in that sense, and I think, so I think that's one important thing that we maybe miss out a little on in Sweden, and we could do more about, since we have a better, if you say, relation to the healthcare system.
One of the complaints we have here in America, and I know that this is not your area of expertise. We'll get back to your area of expertise, I promise. But one of the complaints we have here in America is the average doctor sees the average patient for about 7 minutes, and it's so much easier to write a prescription than it is to sit down and talk about nutrition. It's a time issue more than anything else. Is it similar to that in Sweden?
I would say so. Yeah, I think it is a problem with the time. You have to see so many patients to make ends meet. So that is a problem. But also the knowledge level, and I think there need to be some other resources around the doctor that can take on those tasks. And of course we have some of those, but it can be really built out to educate the people more. I think the diabetes prevention programs that we see here have some potential, although I'm not sure about the numbers that come in there, but still they have to be referred by a doctor to such a program. But I think those are the kinds of things we know from the big diabetes prevention studies that have been made, that you can do a lot with the lifestyle changes only by having some coaching on that end.
So let's talk about diet, because that is your area of expertise. What is it that you're studying, and why did you decide to make a product that was low in sugar?
Okay, so my area has always been to look at the role of food in regulation of blood sugar. So I come from actually a university department which have had a big focus on nutritional quality of carbohydrates for many years, and dietary fibers and things like that. So we were working on my professors were really into the glycemic index concept. So how to rate different carbohydrate-rich meals for their effect on blood sugar. And from that, we looked at both blood glucose and insulin. And then over the years, we also added on more information on satiety, how the effect of satiety related to blood glucose, and then also the aspects of inflammation and how inflammatory factors are influenced by whatever you eat in form of the carbohydrate-rich meals. So I come from a carbohydrate-rich side of things, and I'm still an advocate for good carbohydrates. I just want to make that clear. So that's what this product and this concept is about. Good idea is actually a drink that you take with your meal to lower the glycemic index of the whole meal, if I put it short.
Okay. Yeah, I want to ask exactly how that happens here in a little bit. Let's go back to the idea of carbohydrates. If you're, what is a good carbohydrate in your view?
I think good carbohydrates should deliver some energy, but it should also come in a package where you have other nutrients. So whole grain, for example, is a good carbohydrate to me, especially if it comes in a pretty intact structure. So you have this, if you have like pot barley or this kind of whole more bulgur-like type products, which are actually very dense, and they contain a lot of, as I say, some energy, but also fibers. And along with the fibers, you get a lot of phytonutrients like vitamins and minerals. So I think those are good. But then, of course, all carbohydrates, which are in much lower levels in greens, in vegetables, are good for you.
So when you say whole wheat, are you talking about just like whole wheat Wonder Bread? Is that an example of a good whole wheat?
Maybe I don't know all the brands, but but I'm not
whatever.
talking about. I mean, wheat. Wheat is maybe not the most favorable cereal, to be honest. Oats, rye, and barley. We have studied those much more because they have much more interesting features. Wheat is pretty inert, the fiber, and it's better than not having fiber at all. But I would also recommend people to go into other kind of cereals.
Right. Okay. Pardon me. What are your views on the processing of wheat? Because that, to me, that's where the problems really start. Is the more heavily processed you process a grain, the more fiber you take out of the final product. That's where issues come up. You know, if you're eating steel cut oats for breakfast, that's different than 1 minute oats. It has a different effect on your body. But so what would you say about that?
No, I totally agree. And we have done studies on that, really looking into the coarseness and the refinedness of products. And it's very clear. And since I have been focusing on the glucose response from those products, you can really see a difference. So, and as I said, you lose a lot when you just refine things and process them. You lose a lot of the important nutrients. You end up with only the starch, which is actually glucose molecules on a long string that is super easy for the body to digest, even easier than sucrose, because sucrose has one fructose molecule, which takes longer for the body to use for higher the blood sugar.
Okay. If you have, let's say you have two grains, one is a more heavily processed grain. They're equal amounts of carbohydrates, but one is a little more processed and it spikes your blood sugar higher, but it's cleared out faster because the body has a larger insulin response, versus one that it's the same amount of glucose, but it's maybe released into the bloodstream over a longer period of time. There's not a spike. Which one of those things is going to do more damage to your body?
The first one.
Okay.
Because it will give you this spike and overshoot in insulin, and it will give you a drop thereafter, and you feel tired and you feel hungry again. You want to go and find something to eat. And it triggers inflammation in that very moment, within the time of the meal. It triggers different inflammatory cascades in the body. So that's the most detrimental.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about inflammation, because I wanted to talk a lot about your blood sugar levels with you, but what about the inflammation, the amounts of inflammation that are in grains? Does that kind of go into your mind when you're talking about how healthy a grain is, the amount of inflammation it causes, or is it just the blood sugar levels?
No, that's part of it. But the blood sugar, increasing blood sugar levels will trigger inflammation. So they are so tightly connected. So actually that is what is known from the science, is that the longer term effect of oscillating blood sugar levels, so going up and down many times a day over the course of years, the mechanism is the inflammation and oxidative stress it causes at every meal, and that will wear out your endothelium, your inside of your vessels, and it will cause cardiovascular problems eventually.
Because I feel it when I eat a high carb meal, which I don't do very often, but I'm recording this like 4 days after Thanksgiving, or a week after Thanksgiving, whatever, and I'll eat piece of pie or something, and I'll feel it in my right knee, and it's every time it's in my right knee. I'll have trouble walking. Then I'll get up from sitting down, and my legs don't work as well as they used to, and it's every single time. So you're saying I thought it was just from the inflammation, but you're saying it's spiking the blood sugar. That's what's causing the inflammation. I thought it was the wheat or the grains directly.
Well, there may be a component of that. I really don't want to get into that. I'm not too knowledgeable about the exact components of wheat, and depending on where it comes from, I guess, and what variety and things like that, maybe that has an impact. But I think, and I'm not 100% sure what your diet looks like otherwise, but if you're on a fairly low carbohydrate diet normally, I think you are less sensitive to, or more sensitive to carbohydrates whenever you eat them. So I think that you may experience, if you have some fast carbs, and a lot of them maybe, you will experience severe effects of that, probably more than maybe another person that is more using carbohydrates for daily life a little bit more. So that is, I guess, that is a backside a little bit of going very far down on the carbohydrate intake scale.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Is my ability to handle carbohydrates is probably downregulated because of years of eating a low carb diet, and the other, I feel it on the scale too. If I eat just even one or two higher carb meals, I tend to put on more weight than I did, 20 years ago or 5 years ago before I was doing all this, and I see it there too, which I think is interesting. The body's incredibly adaptive, and it'll probably adapt to whatever you do to it, and it'll figure it out. So your research, let's go back to your research a little bit. Your research, you're looking at the effect of blood sugar, the effect of levels of blood sugar on overall health. Is that a good representation of what you're doing?
Well, I have been mainly focusing on the meal situation. So how can you improve the glucose at the meal? So how can you improve the food or the meals to be more reduced in terms of glucose uptake, or the overall glucose response? So I haven't done too many. I've been involved in some longer term studies, but I have mainly focused on the first effect, if you say, and second meal effect. So whatever you eat for breakfast, if that has an impact on what you eat for lunch. So that kind of perspective mainly.
That part of it is really interesting to me too, because what I eat for breakfast, definitely, if I eat something a little more carby at breakfast, I want more carbs at lunch. There's definitely something to that. So I have to ask, if you're looking at how to control the blood glucose effects of different meals, why aren't you an advocate for meals that don't raise the blood glucose at all, just without carbs?
Because, as I said, I think carb meals include a lot of important nutrients. I think our body needs, our gut is a very important organ with all the bacteria we have that, and we need to feed the bacteria there with good things, and they thrive in on carbohydrates, the indigestible carbohydrates. And to get a lot of those, you need to eat whole grain carbs, for example, from cereals, or you also get them from vegetables, but cereal fiber has something special. And also co-passengers, as we call them, with the different phytonutrients. So I am not an advocate for zero carb diets, although I understand that it's useful for some people. And I think you may try it and see if it works for you, for your special condition. But in general, I think people should eat of everything more or less, but you cannot eat everything always. It has to be in moderation, and you should be really going from including a lot of different foods and veggies in your diet. That's my philosophy.
You think there's some special? This is interesting because I don't know that I've had somebody on here that's advocated for this. You think there's a special health benefit from eating oats or whatever over getting all of your fiber from like spinach or cruciferous vegetables? Like you think someone that's getting their fiber and the carbohydrates mainly from leafy green vegetables or cruciferous vegetables or even some root vegetables, that there is some advantage to that for the person that's doing that, plus eating oats or rye or barley or something like that?
Yeah, I do think that you get things from the oats, for example. You have the soluble fiber part in oats that is good for your both cholesterol and for your blood sugar. I don't know that you can get those in equal amounts from greens or from veggies. They definitely exist there, and of course, depending on what you put together for your meals. But I think it's harder to get than it is from oats, for example. And those work like that they can trap some of the cholesterol that is recirculated from the guts to the liver and bring it out of the body. And then the body has to produce new cholesterol to keep up with whatever you need from gallbladder. And in that sense, you lower your cholesterol, for example. And that is one thing. And the other thing is, I think the B vitamins, they are abundant in cereals. And I think that they are also very important for many functions. So, and then I know that a lot of people, especially in America, rely on on supplements, maybe taking some supplements for filling up whatever is needed. And I'm not sure about your audience, how that is, but I think that, and we are not doing that at all to the same extent in Sweden, for example. And I think that is also why I advocate for a very varied diet, so you get hold of the different nutrients without needing to take supplements.
Yeah, you mentioned grains providing B vitamins. Don't they provide B vitamins because we put them there? I mean, aren't we supplementing the grains? So they don't, wheat and whatever, that doesn't naturally have a B vitamin, does it?
Oh yes, I mean you get it from like cereals.
B12
it will be. B12 is not there, but the rest, there are a range of B vitamins. So they definitely are. We do supplement in like the widest flour, and that is because we have to compensate for the B vitamins that was taken out during the processing.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get back to your product. You've got Good Idea drinks. What was you said that you can take it with a meal and it will help control the blood sugar spikes, specifically the blood sugar spikes, not so much the load over time, but you're trying to blunt that spike. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the load, I would say that the uptake, because our mechanism for taking up carbs is very efficient, we will take up the same amount independent on how much time it takes to take it up, if you say so.
Okay.
But we want to do it in a more controlled way, on a slower rate. So what we see with this is that we can, so the spike is one thing, but it's also the overall glycemic profile, as we call it, that you see after a meal. You want a lower maximum, and you want to sustain it for a little longer, so it just doesn't drop down and make you tired. You want to stay a little bit above the fasting level for a little longer time, because that's what makes you not so hungry when you go into the next meal.
So is it doing this chemically, like it's blunting your body's ability to absorb glucose, or is it doing it more mechanically, where you just eat slower because you've got this drink or something like that?
Okay.
What does it do?
Yeah. So the drink, actually, the idea is that you drink a few mouthfuls of the drink before you even start eating. So on a relatively fasting stomach, and that's also how we have been doing the clinical studies. So before starting the meal, even, you take a few mouthfuls of this drink, and what happens is it has 5 amino acids and chromium. Those are the active components. The 5 amino acids, they are delivered very rapidly down to the gut and are signaling to the insulin-producing cells to release the insulin that is already stored, waiting to be used in your insulin-producing cells. Okay. So what happens is that you have some insulin out there when you then start to eat your carbs. So so what happens is that the carb starts to rise in your blood, but the insulin is already there and able to take care of it. The chromium improves the use of insulin, if you say so. So insulin sensitivity. So overall, you don't increase insulin altogether during the meal, but just in the very first minutes. It happens really rapid, actually. You see a little spark in insulin, which means that insulin is there before carb starts to rise. What happens normally otherwise is that you start to eat a carb-heavy meal, glucose starts to rise very rapidly in your blood, and then insulin comes out. And it's too late on the ball, and it overshoots. And when it overshoots, it will press down the glucose again too low, which makes you feel tired. So it's kind of the opposite. It's like having some protein before your carbs, to be honest. Okay. Which you can do in many other ways as well. You can have some, like the Mediterranean diet, they have a piece of cheese or olives or whatever before their meal. And there's probably, and a soup, in many countries you have a soup, something that stimulates your digestion before the actual meal starts. Okay. So you're doing this with a product that I assume it doesn't have any sugar in it, right? So you've got amino acids that are causing insulin to start being secreted.
Or is
Yep.
it the amino acids, or is it just the sweet taste on the tongue that's causing this?
No, I mean, we do our studies with identical products with and without this. So the flavoring is there, but it's with and without the active components. And we do not see the effect. We see a 25% decrease in the overall glucose response to a meal when you have had good idea with the meal than if you have the identical product without the active components. So it's not the sweet taste. And the sweetness we have in there, which is very, very light anyway, but it comes from it's like from the natural flavors. So there is no sweetener added.
Okay. So, okay. So there's no sweetener. It's just the flavor. That's interesting.
Yep. Which makes it maybe some people hard for, I mean, I know that the palate is pretty, geared towards sweet flavors in this country. Right. That is very clear when you try things here. So this may be a little different experience, but a lot of people really enjoy it because it gives some satisfaction anyway. It has the bubbles and it has a little bit of bitterness from the amino acids. And then we have matched the flavors to be pretty subtle, to not take over the meal. And I think many people find it very interesting.
I've always said that we like our sweet things, here in the States, but in the last 3 or 4 years, there's really been a sharp uptick in these lightly flavored seltzer waters. This is a very fast growing segment of our grocery. I forget the name. What is the name of the big one?
There's LaCroix.
LaCroix. That's what I'm thinking of. LaCroix. That's. They've really, kind of invented a market segment that really wasn't there before it came across.
I think it's been much more. That is something that we have had a long time in Europe. I think we've had
is it really?
much,
we haven't had
much more of that. So that's where we come from in a way. So when we develop the flavors, we think a lot about, okay, so what do we have? Because America is our first market for Good Idea. We kind of developed it really from, anyway, our perspective, but we wanted to introduce it to the American market. So that's where we try to figure out what kind of flavors works best. But we still want to keep it on the more European palate rather than making it sweeter. So, yeah.
So you're using chromium in there, and chromium, we've had there's been a lot of science done to show that it blunts the effect of glucose in the blood, so it's a good thing. Have you thought about adding things like cinnamon or berberine or some of these other products, these natural products that have shown to also blunt the effect of blood sugar?
Yeah, we always have ideas about how we can move forward if we want to make other kind of lines. I don't think it needs to be added to the product we have today, actually, because we will always, they have maybe similar effects in one way. I think our effect is very immediate, and maybe cinnamon would do the same. But we've also thought about adding maybe other minerals that are important, like magnesium or other things. But it's further down the line. We know that there is a big educational piece to make people understand why they have to drink this drink. So that's what we are really focusing on.
Well, let's talk about the education part of it as well. Do you feel like there's a danger in telling someone, just drink a couple mouthfuls of this before you eat, and then you can eat whatever you want, chocolate, cake, ice cream, and it's just not going to be as bad for you? Is there a danger in telling people that?
You can never know what people do in the end, but that's not how we frame it at all. So of course people can interpret it like that. And maybe, as you say, when people are on a strict keto diet and they want a cheat day or something, maybe they can feel helped by this. But that's not, we more see it like we are one tool in the box to help people transition into a more healthy lifestyle. So if you can feel the power of reducing the ups and downs in blood sugar over a period of time, maybe sticking to your old diet but using our product, we hope that will transition you in to actually move into a more healthy lifestyle. Because you will have more energy to do that, I would say, rather than being fatigued from these ups and downs all the time.
In the studies that you've done, of course, you've seen a blunting of the blood sugar effect. Have you seen any measurable weight loss over time in your subjects? Did you hear that?
So we haven't actually done studies on weight loss or and not longer term follow-ups actually. So I cannot say anything about that, but it's kind of known. There are some studies out there focusing on like the glycemic index and glycemic load, where you can see those effects. And but overall, I think it's more from having people overeating less because of the lack of cravings. Sorry. Yeah, so I think that's more of it.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, I think, like I said at the beginning, I think anything that helps people lower the effective blood sugar on their body is ultimately going to be a good thing, because I really think that's the key to that's the key to health. The key to longevity, I think, is to keep your blood sugar as low as possible for as long as possible. Now, I would normally advocate, just taking things that raise blood sugar out of your diet totally, or just taking sugar out, taking especially processed grains out, and maybe some other, sources of carbohydrates like potatoes, things like that. But I understand a lot of people don't want to do that. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, so I think I'm speaking more in terms of trying to balance your blood sugar rather than to lower it as much as you can. So, but of course, the kind of mechanisms we're looking for are more or less the same.
Okay.
We want to avoid this overshoot in insulin, which is not good for you in the long term. And that can be done in many different ways. Spices is also something that is very useful to use to influence blood sugar. And that's maybe something that people, at least some populations in society, including myself, need to use more, because we don't come from that tradition with a lot of more oriental spices. But
right.
Using ginger and cinnamon and turmeric and things like that is also very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also believe that you don't have to go into, as researchers, we have been adding, I've worked with vinegar as well, for example, and its effect on blood glucose. And you add kind of a few tablespoons even to a meal. And that may be a lot for people to have, but I think a little is better than nothing. Mm-hmm. So adding some fibers to every meal, adding some vinegar to every meal, adding some spices to every meal is definitely better than having maybe a big bunch at one meal and not for a week. Right. So more, that comes again with the moderation and having things from everywhere all the time.
I've been looking for someone to come on the podcast to talk about the health benefits of raw apple cider vinegar, because I'm pretty convinced that if you're going to use vinegar, use the raw apple cider vinegar. That looks like that's been that's helped me, at several points. So vinegar, I think, is very powerful.
And I have done some publications on that, actually, both on the glycemic effect and on the appetite side. So vinegar is, again, having a few, maybe adding it to water and drink it before your meal, it's really powerful. Right. It slows down the gastric emptying. So that means that the carbs are delivered slower to your gut, and thereby they are slower uptake. So it's a very good mechanism as well. You need many tools in your box for
I think so too.
Diet.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. All right. So if my listeners want to get a hold of some good idea drinks, where can they do all that?
So I would say everyone has access to Amazon,
Yes.
Amazon.com. We are on there. Good idea drinks, you search for. And that's the easiest for everyone. We also sell from our own homepage. If you're not a Prime member, you may want to go there and make a purchase. It's www.goodideadrinks.com. And then we are in up to like 500 stores, California, Midwest, and Texas area at this point. So if you're around there, you can go and look in your stores. And we have a store locator on our website, so you can have a look there.
Do you know what chains? Is it Kroger or is it Walmart?
Yeah. No, it's in Midwest. It's Hy-Vee, Fresh Time. In Texas, it's Central Market.
Oh, okay.
And in California, it's more like smaller independent retailers.
Okay. Well,
Lassen's. I would say in LA area, we are in Lassen's. There are quite a few stores in that chain as well.
Okay. Oh, sounds great. It sounds like you're trying to take over the world, which is good. Will we ever see like TV commercials for it, that kind of thing?
Oh, of course. I hope that. But it may be some years ahead.
Right. Okay. So what's next for you and your brand?
So we're actually, the whole educational piece is so important for us, and we're trying to figure out how to come closer to the consumer, how for them to actually see the effect. We're doing quite a lot of demos in workplaces and things because that's where people can feel the effect. They do not get tired in the afternoon if they drink this with their lunch, for example.
Okay.
And we're also now, so I've been wearing a continuous glucose monitor myself and some in our team for almost 2 months now, learning ourselves how our blood sugar works. And it's really interesting. And we're looking into working with more of those companies to address, people maybe in the pre-diabetic field or even people that are interested in learning more about this, because this is a way for people to understand how our drink works in their lives. And then we're also planning new scientific studies with a good idea.
Perfect. And are there any like social media channels you'd like for my people to follow, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're all tagged Good Idea Drinks. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Ellen. Sorry. Ellen?
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for having me. Great talking to you.
Thank you so much. And guys, those of you listening, hold on. We'll be right back with some more information.